Hello everyone, welcome to Law Excellence Daily Hindu News Analysis. Today we will be discussing some important articles that appeared on 4th June 2020. Before starting our discussion, as usual, we'll see a small announcement. Admissions have started for online live General Studies PCM 2021 batch. For any queries, you can call to this number, and we have also residential facilities in Hyderabad campus. Now, today's personality for discussion is Kiran Bedi, and she's a very famous personality, and everyone knew her. And she's a retired Indian police officer and a social activist. And currently, she is serving as Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry. And she is the first female officer and started her service in somewhere in 1975. And she served for almost 35 years and resigned in 2007. She took a voluntary resignation, voluntary retirement. And in her 35 years of service, she served in various places like Delhi, Goa, Chandigarh, and even in Mizoram too. And for the reforms, especially she is known for prison reforms. And for the reforms she introduced in Tihar jail, she won the Raman Magsaysay Award in 1994. And she started her career in Chanakyapuri, a district in Delhi, as ACP, Assistant Commissioner of Police, and she won President's Police Medal Award for gallantry in 1979 for her abilities to control the clashes between two sects in Sikh group. One is Nirankari sect and Akali sect. So she was successful in controlling the protest and fight between these two groups, and for which she got a Presidential Medal Award. Then also she introduced a beatbox system, which is nothing but a complaint box that she was introduced in her district, and each beat box was installed in each and every ward, and a beat constable were instructed to have their lunch near this box so that every person can come and give complaint. And she was also successful in reducing drug abuse in especially northern part of Delhi, and she also set up a detoxification center there, and by raising community funds. So she is a very inspirational figure and motivational personality, and we can use this information in our GS paper for ethics. As usual, our discussion is categorized into two types: daily editorial enrichment program and targeted news analysis. In daily editorial enrichment program, we will be discussing those editorials that appeared in Hindu newspaper. And in targeted news analysis, we will be discussing those articles that appeared in other pages of the Hindu newspaper. These are the page numbers of the respective editions, Hyderabad and Bangalore. Please have a look into it. Now, download link for notes in PDF format is available in the description below. You can download it. And also every day we are conducting a daily current affairs test. It's a free. You can write in this website elearn.lawx.in. So daily we'll be giving 10 MCQs, and the test opens at 9:30 p.m. Okay, we will start with today's discussion. The first article is India's Parliament is missing in action. So what the article is trying to say? The article states that by quoting various examples across the world where the parliaments are meeting and discussing various matters even during the lockdown. But in India, we haven't seen any of that sort with respect to Indian Parliament. So the article says that it is completely a negation of the constitutional duties envisaged for the Parliament. This is what the article is trying to argue. It also argues that the executive have passed in the recent 2 months various notifications, for example Disaster Management Act and some notifications under it, without any scrutiny or approval by the parliament. How they can do it? This is one of the issue the article is trying to say. And also one other issue which the article is trying to say is that because of lack of meetings of the representatives, the grievances of the people haven't addressed, and there are some pressing issues like migration issues or the impact of lockdown in economy. These issues are not raised because there are no representatives who can address all these grievances. So now we will look into the syllabus mapping. It comes under GS paper 2, structure, functioning, power and conduct of business in parliament. And the issue is the role of the parliament. What is the envisaged role for the parliament? The dimension is parliamentary duty in lockdown situations. So the learning objectives are like to understand the role of parliament in the democracy and to know about the role of parliament in extraordinary situations like lockdown. Now, see, in Indian polity, we have two foundational principles. Indian political system is based on parliamentary form of democracy, and also we have something called representative form of democracy. What are these two things? What is a representative form of democracy and what is a parliamentary democracy? In a parliamentary democracy, executive is accountable to the legislature. That is one aspect of it, and executive is part of the legislature. So we have this type of system. In representative democracy, the people representatives, India is governed by the people representatives, and the people representatives should always strive for the rights of the citizens. They should address the grievance of the people, and the people's problems they will represent in the parliament. These are the two foundational principles. But the way parliament functioned during lockdown is a negation of these two fundamental principles. So this is what the article is trying to say. Now it starts with comparison elsewhere. For example, it mentions about Canada, it mentions about Britain, where the parliament seen some sort of functioning, but India it has not happened. So we have something called Inter-Parliamentary Union, which has documented that the process how various parliaments across the world are conducting the meetings during the pandemic. So it released some sort of document. Now it also mentions about what is the role of parliament in a system of governance. The fundamental role is, yes, it will ensure mutual checks and balances. So our Indian polity is based on checks and balances. So parliament is a body which ensure that mutual checks and balances. And the second very important role is it provides accountability. What is accountability? It is nothing but answerability. Who has to be answerable to whom? The executive has to be answerable to the legislature, and through the legislature, through the parliament, the executive, the government is accountable to the people. So these are the two very fundamental roles of the parliament. Now it also have one more role. For example, in the recent 2 months we have seen that executive has passed various has made various financial announcements. For example, under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Now, what is the role of parliament is that it will scrutiny all the expenditure made by the executive. But because of lack of various meetings in the recent 2 months, so now this essential role of the parliament has not been done. Now, what are the problems the article is trying to address because of no meeting? One is no proper act is there to deal with pandemics. So whatever steps the government is doing right now, they are doing under Disaster Management Act of 2005. But unfortunately, Disaster Management Act of 2005 do not cover pandemics. But still, government is doing whatever the initiatives government is doing, it is taking under that legal, it is doing under the legal framework. But parliament, if parliament could have been there, they could have enacted a law which could have given broad guidelines how the government has to handle the present pandemic. So this is a lost opportunity. Now, no scrutiny of government expenditure, which we already have discussed. So under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, government announced 20 lakh crore package, and in that process, finance minister announced 5 tranche of economic stimulus package. Now, everything what government have done, there is nobody to scrutinize the government steps. So this is one negation too. And already we have discussed, we have witnessed the plight of migrants, and everyone is bothered about increasing the spread of cases. Now on these pressing issues, there is no one to question the government. That is the biggest problem. So this is also one third issue. Because of no meeting, there was no questions that can be asked on various pressing issues. And also the article mentions that there is no legal framework, or there is nothing called some sort of guidelines or procedures which prohibit parliament not to conduct meetings during this pandemic. There are some provisions which facilitate parliament to have some sort of meetings. For example, president may summon parliament to meet at such time and place as he thinks fit. That is one clause provided in the constitution. Article 85 of the constitution deals with this clause. For example, Article 85 says about the president shall from time to time summon each house of the parliament. And there are also some rules of procedure which will empower Secretary General to issue summons to each member of parliament of specifying the date and place for a session. Even this type of clauses are there, and the rules also allow the parliamentary committees to be constituted and function too. Even having all these provisions too, till now we haven't had a single meeting in the last 2 months. This is completely a negation of the constitutional responsibility the parliament was empowered with. But however, the article also provides with some sort of solution too. Now it is saying that why can't we use the technology to ensure these meetings and all the discussions to be held. Now we'll move on to the next article. Time to discontinue free power for farmers. Very important topic. There is a chance to be asked in exam. So what the article is trying to say? The article is criticizing the free power policy of various state governments. It also criticizes the people who are supporting the free power policy on various grounds. And also the article recommends or it supports the direct benefit transfer announcement which was recently made by the central government. Now it asks the states to shift from the free power supply to the direct benefit transfers. These are some important aspects which this article is trying to address. Now syllabus mapping, it can be asked under GS paper 2, government policies and interventions in various sectors and issues involved in their design and implementation. Yes, it can be asked here. And also in GS paper 3, issues related to direct farm subsidies. Now what is the central issue? It is free power to farmers. What are the issues involved in it? Now the dimension is issues in the policy of free power to farmers. So here are the learning objectives. What is the learning objective? To understand the issues involved in providing free power to farmers and to know about the flaws in the arguments for free power. Now what the article is trying to say is that recently central government under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan announced a measure. In fifth tranche of economic stimulus package, there was an announcement. What is that announcement? As per this announcement, now the state governments were allowed to increase their borrowing capacities from 3% to 5% of GSDP. And I think you people might be knowing in the last 2 months, states were demanding the central government to increase their borrowing limits because they don't have right now the revenue sources due to the lockdown. Central government accepted that. But there is a condition to avail the benefit. What is the condition? It asks the state governments to shift from free power supply to farmers to direct benefit transfers in a timely manner. Means you have to do it within a particular time period. This is what the new announcement. And why this free power supply government wants to scrap is that this is a mostly political vote bank game. So most of the state governments do that to get vote bank, but there is no rationale in giving free power to the farmers. This is what the article is also arguing. Now some benefits of giving free power supply to the farmers is, one is it provides food security. There is because most of the land in India is rain fed. So if you allow free power supply, now they'll get food security. Second one is it will provide livelihood opportunity to the farmers, because when you have water you can irrigate and you can produce some crops, so it will really provide some sort of livelihood opportunities. And the third benefit of providing free power supply to farmers is it helps farmers who are not benefited out of canal irrigation. Actually, who need free power supply? Those farmers who can't get water because of from the canal irrigation. Now they need some sort of free power supply so that they can extract water from ground. So these are the three benefits of this free power supply. But unfortunately, in the last decade, because of this policy, there was huge accumulation of subsidies. For example, subsidies amounting to 33,000 crore in at least 3 or 4 states. So that is one criticism against the free power policy of farmers. Power subsidy bills. Next one, when you get something free, you don't know the value of that, right? So this is the second issue. Because of this free power supply, there is lot of wastage of water, because now you're extracting water more than that is needed, and also you're wasting the electricity. This is one more criticism. Now when you have something free for power supply, yes, there is a chance of extracting more groundwater. Now there is an issue called depletion of groundwater resources. For example, see the Punjab Haryana region. Now these are the over irrigated regions, and the groundwater table here is very low. Why? Because too much of water exploitation have done because of this free power supply. Now other thing is lack of accurate measurement of how much electricity is being consumed, because there are no meters to track how much amount of electricity is being consumed. So these are some critical views against the free power policy, which the article is trying to address. Now what is the solution, what the article is trying to say? Now there are issues with regard to free power policy. So now it is the right time for the states to move towards something called direct benefit transfers, so that it will reduce the subsidy bills, it will enhance the revenues of the state government to spend on other welfare programs, it will also address the groundwater depletion, which is a major crisis India is facing. So these are some solutions which the article is trying to address. Now we will see the next article 7 to 11. What the article is trying to say. It mentions about the recent decision taken by US President Donald Trump to expand group of 7 countries into a group of 11 countries, including India. Now the article warns India that we have to be cautious and we should not take a hasty decision to join the group, and we should be cautious before joining the group by taking other factors into consideration. This is what the article is trying to say. The syllabus mapping is, it comes under JS paper 2 international relations, bilateral, regional and global groupings involving India or affecting India's interest. The issue is all about G11. The dimension is consequences to India by joining the G11 group. So the learning objective is to know about the G11 and the context for a proposal to set up. What made now Donald Trump to propose a G11 group, and to look into the consequences to India by joining the group. These are the learning objectives. Now we will look into the details of the article. Now US President Donald Trump said the existing G7 group is an outdated group. It has to be reconfigured. So he proposed something called expansion of this group. He wants to include 4 more countries like India, Russia, South Korea and Australia, and to make a G11 group, a group of 11 countries. Of course, the decision taken by US President Donald Trump was welcomed by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and said that it is a creative and far-sighted move taken by US President, and it is almost this grouping almost reflect the new realities created by the post-COVID-19 world. And South Korea and Australia accepted the decisions taken by President Donald Trump, whereas Russia said it will join the group only if it is treated as an equal. And one important country which was left out of this grouping was China. And why China was left by US President? It's most obvious that recently we have seen tensions between US and China over various issues, especially with regard to how China handled coronavirus. And also the intention of bringing G11 group according to US is to traditionally bring all the allies together and talk how to deal with the future of China. This is what one of the intention of this G11 grouping. So how India should take this, how India should look about this grouping. Of course, there are some pros and cons of India joining this group. One of thing is that it would recognize India's place amongst the world's richest nations. That is one advantage. And the second one is it will give an acknowledgement to India's voice as a global power. This is one of the advantage. Of course, there are some disadvantages also which India has to take into consideration before joining this group. The first disadvantage is that it might further aggravate the tensions between US and China. On the face of it, the group looks like it was created to target China. So this is one issue. And the second issue is, if you observe the performance of this G7 group in the last few years, it is not at all effective. So if you just expand the members of the group, now will it become effective? That is the second issue which India has to take into consideration. And the third issue is, there is a lack of consistency in US President Donald Trump policies. So because of this lack of consistency, there is low credibility in the decisions which he is taking. So now India also has to observe it very cautiously. Now we will move on to the next article. In Himalayan state down, the dilemmas for Delhi. What the article is trying to emphasize. It mentions that the recent face-offs between India and China across LAC and the recent transgressions by China across LAC is unprecedented. That's what the article is trying to mention. And it also provides what are the reasons for this unprecedented level of transgressions by China across LAC. What are the political factors? What are the strategic factors? What are the other factors involved in this unprecedented level of transgressions by China? And after that, it also mentions what India has to do, how India can limit China's adventurism across LAC, line of actual control. So these are the three important aspects which this article is trying to address. Regarding syllabus mapping, it comes under GS paper 2, international relations, India and its neighborhood. And issue, of course, it is India-China relations, and the dimension is dilemmas for India over Chinese aggression across line of actual control. So what are the learning objectives here? We can understand the reasons. So what are the reasons for this unprecedented level of aggression on part of China? And the next, the dilemmas India have in countering Chinese aggression across LAC. So these are the things which we will look. Now we will look into the details given in the article. The article mentions that there are various reports which say that there is an unprecedented transgressions by China across line of actual control. The number of troops that China deployed, the scope and the extent with which the China is transgressing line of actual control is unprecedented. And what is making China to do that? So there are some reasons which article is mentioning. The first thing about international pressure. Regarding the origin of novel coronavirus, there was an international pressure by India and even by other countries like US to come clean. So to divert global attention from this international pressure, China is increasing its transgressions across line of actual control. This is one reason which article is trying to say. And second one, recently India made some statements over Aksai Chin. Aksai Chin is a conflicted territory in the eastern part of India. It's a conflicting territory between India and China. So India made a few test statements regarding Aksai Chin, which China didn't like. So to address that issue, the recent unprecedented transgressions we are witnessing. And the third one is, now India to have a equal playing field across LAC, it also increased its infrastructure. It also beefed up its infrastructure across line of actual control. Now to stop India's investment or to stop India from further developing infrastructure, now China is promoting these transgressions. It is intentionally done across line of actual control. This is one reason for this unprecedented level of transgressions. Now one more controversial project is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It is a connectivity which passes through Pakistan administered territory. Now India raised its concerns over this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now China is not accepting the criticism raised by India over CPEC. So to counter that, now we are seeing this unprecedented transgressions. Now there are some strategic calculations by Chinese. Now what are the strategic calculations by the China? For example, under Xi Jinping, now China is trying to assert itself as the next superpower. Now it wants New Delhi to fall in its line. So this is a one important strategic calculation. And there is also something called a political message involved in it. What is this political message? Now there is something called a Cold War tensions, and also there is an issue with regard to Hong Kong. Now China telling US that it can handle pressure, and it is also telling India that it has the political and military power to put pressure on New Delhi, even if it is facing Hong Kong issue or a coronavirus issue or other Cold War tensions with other countries. So this is what a political message it wants to convey. The article also mentions that even though there is an unprecedented transgressions by China across line of actual control, why India is not acknowledging that? And the article argues two reasons for that. One is India believes that China have a military superiority across line of actual control. And the second one, there are some domestic political compulsions. So because of these two reasons, India is not acknowledging even some minor losses across line of actual control. Now the article is also proposing what are the limits India can really do for this to counter China's adventurism across line of actual control. First thing, there are some places across line of actual control where India's military is superior when compared to China's military. Now, why can't you deploy forces across those spots? So that is one measure the article is trying to recommend. So at several places China is militarily weak, so at those spots why can't you deploy more number of troops so that you can divert China's attention from these conflicting points. And the second thing, yes, though China might have military superiority over continent, but regarding maritime matters India have superiority, and most of the commercial and other trade related aspects of China flows through these maritime areas. So now India can use this as a domain to limit China's adventurism. This is the second point which the article is mentioning. The third thing, Beijing don't want to seriously damage almost 100 billion trade which it is having with India because of this military adventurism. So now India can use this trade relationship with China to counter or to limit adventurism of China across line of actual control. So these are some proposals made in the article to limit China's adventurism. Now we'll move on to the next article, Cabinet Note for Agricultural Marketing Reforms. So recently Cabinet approved the amendment to Essential Commodities Act, and it is also trying to pass and two ordinances. One is regarding the farming produce trade and commerce ordinance, and also it wants to bring an ordinance to facilitate contract farming. So this article is mentioning all the three things which Cabinet have approved. And the mains syllabus mapping, it comes under GS paper 3, issues of buffer stocks and food security and supply chain management. And what is the issue? It's speaking about agricultural marketing reforms. And the dimension is the cabinet approval for various agricultural marketing reforms which was announced as part of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Now, learning objective is to know the approval of various agricultural marketing reforms by the cabinet and to critically understand the benefits of these reforms to the farmers. Now, we will look into the details given in the article. The article mentions the central government decision to introduce various ordinances to bring agricultural marketing reforms. And one ordinance is to amend Essential Commodities Act. What is this amendment? These amendments try to deregulate 6 products from Essential Commodities Act of 1955. What are these essential products that are deregulated? One is onion, cereals, pulses, oil seeds, potatoes, and edible oils. These are the 6 products which are deregulated from Essential Commodities Act. But why government has to deregulate? Because it is believed that the Essential Commodities Act restricted production, storage, and distribution of various commodities in the last 65 years. So now it wants to amend. Now it believed that if you deregulate products from Essential Commodities Act, private investments will come in. Now they'll invest in cold storage infrastructure, and so that agricultural marketing infrastructure will be built up. This is the logic and intention of the government to deregulate some 6 products from Essential Commodities Act. And what are the 2 other ordinances? One ordinance is that the Farming Produce Trade and Commerce Ordinance 2020, and the second one is Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services. Now, what is the first ordinance aims to? See, till now the farmer don't have an authority to sell his produce beyond the mandi that is created under Agricultural Produce Marketing Committees Act. He can't sell his produce beyond the mandis. But now this ordinance will empower the farmer to sell his produce anywhere in the country. Now it also allows for interstate trade. He can sell his produce anywhere where he'll get right price. This is the first ordinance. And the second ordinance is about promoting contract farming. Now, what is contract farming and why it is needed? Under this contract farming, a person who wants to buy the produce, he can engage in a contract with a farmer before the sowing season. Now he can give seeds, he can give some amount of money and ask the farmer to produce. And he will give a assurance that after the crop is harvested, he will purchase the crop at a predetermined price. This is what contract farming. So this ordinance will allow that contract farming. And what is the advantage of contract farming? Now it will shift the unpredictability in prices from farmer to the corporate sponsor. This is one advantage. Now, what is the issue involved? Some people argue that, see, this contract farming mechanism will benefit only some sections. It will only benefit the corporate sector. It won't benefit the small farmers. So these are some arguments raised against these ordinances. Okay. Now we will see the next article. Nation's name plea can be sent to Center Supreme Court. What the article talks about? It mentions about a plea filed before Supreme Court which wants to amend Article 1 of the Constitution. What is this Article 1 says? Article 1 says that India, that is Bharat, is a union of states rather than a federation of states. Now it defines the name and also defines the nature of the polity. Now this person wants to replace the name of India with Bharat. What are his arguments? He says that this name is of a foreign origin. So, and it also says if you replace India with Bharat, it will bring some sense of pride in our nationality. And it also ensure that citizens of this country to get over the colonial past. So these are the 3 arguments which this petitioner is putting forward before the Supreme Court. And what Supreme Court have said, see, this plea has to be transformed as a representation and it has to be sent to the central government, especially the Minister of Home Affairs, to look into the issue. Why? Because amending of a constitution is under the jurisdiction of Parliament. So this is what the article is trying to say. And mains, it comes under syllabus GS paper to Indian Constitution, significant provisions. So they can be asked whether Indian name of India can be changed as Bharat. And also issue plea to name India as Bharat, and the dimension is plea in court is converted as a representation to the central government. The learning objective is to understand the arguments put forward by the petitioner to name India as Bharat alone. So what are the arguments he kept forward, and to know about the apex court's arguments in deciding on the plea. We will see the amendment procedure. See, Indian constitution can be amended, and a constitution to be dynamic has to be amended. Now there is a process for amendment. You can't do just like that. So Indian constitution can also be amended. It can be done in 3 ways. One is by simple majority of the parliament. For example, there are certain articles, even article 1 of the constitution can be done through this process. And there is one article 368, which provides for the amendment procedure. So this type of amendment doesn't come under article 368. Now there are 2 types under article 368. One is you can amend a constitution by a special majority of the parliament, and you can also amend some provisions, for especially federal provisions, you can amend by special majority of the parliament plus ratification from half of the states. So these are the 3 ways through which a constitution can be amended. Now we will look into the last article for today's discussion, that is India slams defacement of rock carvings in Gilgit-Baltistan region. Where is this region? It is in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Now, what the article is trying to say? India has raised strong concerns against the destruction of Buddhist carvings in this region. And it also said there is a project constructed by China and Pakistan jointly, that is Diyamar Basha project. Diyamar Basha hydropower project, and because of this project also there is a threat posed to the cultural heritage, especially the Buddhist cultural heritage that is present in this region. And India also criticizes that the religious and cultural rights of the people in this region are being violated by the Pakistan. So these are some claims India is making. So it comes under syllabus mapping main GS paper 2 international relations, India and its neighborhood, and even it can be asked under GS paper 1 Indian heritage. So the issue dimension we have mentioned here, and the learning objective is to know about the reasons for defacement of rock carvings in the Gilgit-Baltistan region. We have seen what are the reasons. One is the construction of the hydroelectric project by China and Pakistan, and the second one, the violation of religious and cultural rights of the people in that region. Now we will see the geography of Gilgit-Baltistan region. See where it is located. It is located here, almost tri-junction between Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and even with China. So strategically very important region here. Okay. Now regarding Buddhism in this region. Buddhism was a very prominent religion in this area along with a local religion, which is a variant of Buddhism that originated in Tibet, that is called as Bon religion. This is the local religion. So here people practice Buddhism and even Bon religion too. So till 15th and 16th century, Buddhism was prominent in this region, but later, due to more frequent Islamic invasions and even continued presence of Islam over this region, the region demography turned into completely Islam. So many of the Buddhist sites, artifacts, etc., are taken to Ladakh region from this place. However, there are some popular Buddhist archaeological sites there. One is Mantal Buddha Rock, and the second one is Sacred Rock of Hunja. So the article mentions about this heritage site there. So we will look into prelims practice questions. So which of the following are the possible benefits to the agri sector with the amendment to Essential Commodities Act? So what are the benefits that agricultural sector will be getting because of this amendment? Attract foreign direct investments into the agricultural sector. It will boost the agricultural growth to 10% per annum. Okay. It will modernize food supply chain. Yes, see the moderate statements here, and one statement looks so extreme here, so you can eliminate it. And what is the option? You just post in the comment box. And second one, consider the following list. China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar. Arrange the countries that India shares its border in descending order of length. Okay, it is about border question, and please try to answer and post in the comment section. Now, before closing our discussion, there is a small announcement. We have something called Kalam's Mains Answer Writing Program, Season 3. Already we have done 2 seasons. Now we are in the Season 3. In this Season 3, every week there will be a particular subject discussed by subject experts. So there will be one question and they will be discussing how to write, how to approach that particular question. It is a live program which will be opening at 9 p.m. every day. Please watch this and it will surely improve your writing skills. And with that, we have done today's discussion. Thank you, one and all.